Everything you are about to observe in this video has been done within the guidelines of fair use. This is Comrade Net, Cleric of Public Relations. I have to update everyone here on the recent situation with Dr. Weisfeld, Chairman of the Revolution. He had to sign something which bans him from the Jewish Community Center. I mean, this is really outrageous. Now, we have learned also, though, that straight from the Chairman of the Revolution himself, Abraham Weisfeld, PhD, that precisely on August 21st, he's going to be in a hearing, and he will move a motion to dismiss the ground that the charge is frivolous, since the sign written that he wrote on, this was the mischief he did, where he wrote the word "and Palestine" on something that said Israel. It only cost $1, about $1. It was a very cheap item, and what he did was not in any way anti-Semitic. And because anti-Semitism, in the Bundist movement was expanded to mean some also Islamophobia as well as Judophobia. Let me just clarify. When I say anti-Semitism, I mean Judeophobia, which he's being smeared as a Judophobe, basically. This is really outrageous. So, I'm going to read to you something that had been written by the late Uri Adia, because I said I was going to give some context to what the Bundist movement was and soon what it is. And to do that, I think it'd be best if I read from other people who were involved in what this is. So this is taken from a PDF by Uri Adia. The Jewish Bundist diaspora movement is the international Jewish revolutionary vanguard of theory, praxis, and outreach. While I may have somewhat of disapproving tone towards our chairman, it is out of necessity. The truth is we are incomplete without Dr. Weisfeld. I must give some historical context to the Jewish Bundist diaspora movement. This might be one of the most essential records regarding the Bundist movement. It is best not to confuse the Jewish Bundist diaspora movement with the Bundist movement, Jewish Liberation and Anti-Zionist Action. The Bundist movement, Jewish Liberation and Anti-Zionist Action, is a Jewish rights educational organization based in Phoenix, Arizona. The Jewish Bundist diaspora movement is a continuation and or actualization of the Jewish People's Liberation Organization. It was Abraham Weisfeld, PhD, who founded the Jewish People's Liberation Organization, which never crystallized into reality until 2009. Before that, it was something to be seen on Yahoo groups and Facebook. As for Dr. Weisfeld, he was always active. He was always touching grass. He only does more and more real-life work as time goes by. Starting in 2009, Donna Newman and Comrade Net started to take to the streets in protest against Zionism. Comrade Net always called what they did the Bundist movement. Donna Newman did too, but she would also call what they did Jewish Bund or Bundist diaspora movement, or Jewish Bundist movement. But a factor which cannot be skipped is that Ms. Newman started an organization in 2009 alongside the activism she was doing with Comrade Net. This organization she formed had the official name of Bundist Movement, Jewish Liberation and Anti-Zionist Action, which she sometimes called Bundist Movement for short. I have come to realize that Ms. Newman never actually explained that the work she was doing with Comrade Net was not necessarily tied to the building of a Jewish rights educational organization, which is the official Bundist movement. Let me read that again. I have come to realize that Miss Newman never actually explained the work she was doing with Comrade Net was not necessarily tied to the building of a Jewish rights educational organization, which is the official Bundist movement. Oh yeah, so basically what's being said here is that this explains that the Jewish Bundist diaspora movement, which was more global in its outreach, was not the same thing as the the thing that the mass group of known as the Bundist movement, which I was not nearly as involved in as Donna Newman. But anyway, so what I've just read to you will be featured in Manual for Revolution, by the way, one of Uri Adia's writings. Now I'm going to get into something else here. Whether they had known it or not, Palestine is the enemy of America because it was the first constitutional refugee interfaith democracy. Palestine has always been a democratic, federal, communitarian country. It is an interfaith, theocratic civilization on the social level, but on the sovereign level, it is a multi-faith, multi-ethnic, international culture. And by the way, this negates the definition that Dr. Weisfeld uses on sovereignty, which he always refers to the state. And that is not against the chairman. The chairman speaks in the academic language. This presentation I'm giving to you is largely the Bundist dialectic that we shared, which Dr. Weisfeld has come to bring commentary towards. Objections and agreements, which was the whole point of this collaborated work we were in the midst of doing before such tragedy struck us. But this thing that I've written here, because after mentioning the manual, this is all me that's written this, and I've taken some references from different places. So Palestine, whenever Americans want to know why do we side with Israel? Why don't we ever help Palestine? It's because the state interest of what the United States is as a settler colonial country hides that by pretending to be the great refuge country, the refugee country, which actually is what Palestine is. Palestine was that. That's what Palestine was before 1948. 1948, by the way, is when the State of Israel was founded. So the Western Orient was a refuge. The Western Orient was a refuge to get away from the growing Western cultural system, which today is called the White Nations, which grew out of the periods after the Black Plague. This is now what I'm explaining here is a highly outside of the Hegelian Eurocentric view of pseudo-history, which has a lot to do with also why I don't appear to being a Marxist or an anarchist, but rather what is known as a demarchist, which is a much more suppressed set of theories, which I'm focusing most of my time on gathering the writings for that, which is also why I may not always be involved in joint statements. Soon, either today, the next day, or some other time, there is to be a joint statement, which is going to include some of the people that have the MRN badges. MRM meaning Maoist Rebel News. I'm not too clear about how this joint statement will take place. I probably won't be amongst it. I do want to have another interview with Dr. Weisfeld, or possibly interview him and us discuss the matters around this, because this is actually a civil rights issue. Dr. Weisfeld being banned from an entire community center. They're doing this to a second-generation Holocaust survivor, which in Jewish modern ethics is a big no-no anyway. But, let me continue. So, this is why Christian Zionism, which created both Americanism and Britishism, before Herzl's post-Jewish theocratic ideology. And by the way, Jewish Zionism is under the control technically by proxy of Christian Zionism. But Christian Zionism was originally called Restorationism. They later called it Christian Zionism to be in better cahoots with the Jewish Zionists, which are not in any way coming from the genesis of Judaism. Yes, it was done by these Jewish dropouts, such as Theodor Herzl, but Theodor Herzl was not really well cultured in Judaism at all. So that's the thing. Zionism is alien. Anyway, this is why Christian Zionism which created both Americanism and Britishism before Herzl's post-Jewish aristocratic ideology of Zionism. So understand that Britishism and Americanism, which is really actually where Zionism gets its idea from, and technically Germanism too, because you have these colonial and settler colonial things that were becoming popular blocks. You can say that words like Americanism and Britishism are more retrospective terms that start occurring in the 20th century and more so in the 21st century as people identify it, but it's not really important where these terms came from. There is a such notion as Americanism, and there is a such notion as Britishism, and this is largely where Zionism, gets its stuff from. But both Britishism and Americanism are really actually rooted in restorationism, which this is all part of what was the Enlightenment movement, and this is also why a lot of socialists have come out against humanism. But anyway, so yeah, Herzl's ideology of Zionism is a post-Jewish aristocratic ideology. That's very important to understand. And Meir Sharim is the most stable Haredi community in the world. Everyone in Meir Sharim speaks Yiddish, and some of them speak Yiddish and Arabic. The name Meir Sharim runs deep within the Torah culture relating to the Parsha Toldot. According to a tradition, the community originally had 100 gates. Another meaning of Meir Sharim, and it has more than one meaning, but one of the most understood meanings of the term Meir Sharim is 100 gates. The Meir Sharim neighborhood is just outside the old city Al-Quds, or Old Jerusalem. The Meir Sharim neighborhood was established in 1874. That's before the founding of the state of the settler colonial project of Israel. Before the Zionist project of Israel. So, which by the way, you got to remember, was founded in 1948. Meir Sharim was founded in 1874. By building a society of 100 shareholders. At least that's how the tradition goes of their own community, how they save themselves. But they were known by the rest of Palestine as Palestinians. This settlement came to join as part of Palestine, not to colonize. The Meir Sharim neighborhood has always identified as Jewish and Palestinian. On December 21st, 2022, during a week of police raids and harassment of peaceful anti-Zionist activists in the Meir Sharim neighborhood of Jerusalem, a large group of police entered the neighborhood to remove a Palestinian flag from a lamppost. The police have been met with strong protest. I give you this event to watch.
Abnehmen die Fenner, genau, abnehmen die Fenner.
Und abnehmen Fenner, oder die ganze Messe?
Ja. Die Fenner, die Fenner. Sind die Fenner, für die Fenner, die Fenner. Die Fenner, die Fenner. Was? Was ist da? Ja, wer? Weiter?
Henne, geh mal, komm mal rein für sein.
Ja, schon da? Ne, er gewinnt da, בכלל. אותו הסגרתי מלך.
Esta me dispisti ne dove stai di buoni.
אבל איפה הכיתות לכם? למה אתם לא יהודים? למה רק זה מעניין אתכם בתור יהדות? למה רק זה מעניין אתכם בתור יהדות?
I'm the Palestinian terrorist. That's why free Palestinian.
نجل مع السعيد نجل مع السعيد نجل مع السعيد نجل مع السعيد
טובי! היה מגימורי.
Aquí me final, dale la novela, aquí me final. Aquí me final.
ראית מה הוא עשה פה של הילד? הוא כן וואי, הוא מגיע עם התיק מהחיידר, אה?
היטלר! היטלר!
הלו!
Dr. Abram Weisfeld, according to several citizens of Palestine in the city of Nablus, recognized Dr. Weisfeld as a Jewish Palestinian. I'm going to now present a conversation between myself and Dr. Weisfeld. This should be seen as an actual convergence dialectic between the chairman of the revolution and the cleric of public relations. These very conversations actually do happen amongst other Jewish people, not just us. They definitely happened with the Boone Council staff who was martyred in 2019. So, to my Marxists and my anarchists, my comrades, my Marxist and anarchist comrades, you should be giving your critiques of it, especially you, Joe. You know who I'm talking about. You're a squatter. You especially can comment here. I know that you get frustrated with Chairman Weisfeld. I know you get frustrated with me. I know you get frustrated with the guys over at the MRM clique, which I actually helped build, but I'm not really part of that. Because that's a very Maoist thing, which I hold a lot of respect for. But there's something I should explain. While criticisms of myself and Dr. Weisfeld and Donna Newman will be approached, I have to know how to handle that first, because first I'm going to give a 3-part series about national cultural autonomy before I do that. But Gingeros, and you all know who you are. Anybody could, Kara Stokely, the one formerly known as the Lumpen Third Worlds, but now known as Lumpen Maoist, she can comment here. Falcon General is definitely welcome to comment here and put their criticisms forth, and I'm asking for that though, because that does feed into what the chairman needs to know. But this is still nonetheless a very good video. It's probably the favorite back and forth between me and Dr. Weisfeld. By the way, ahead of time, I should warn, he has altered his views of China since this video, which I'm happy to say. I mean, some would criticize this, still sounds apologetic, but he has confronted what China does to Africa. Finally. Anyway, those are things that people should discuss, is how they view China and Russia, because China and Russia are big hegemonic powers just like the United States of America, and we should not pretend that they're not. While they don't always align with one another, these are the three great superpowers that, you know, try to dominate the planet. China is different in the sense that it uses soft power, hard power, and it's very intelligent with what it does. It uses a private sector, a public sector, you know, to carry out its imperialism. Russia uses underdog countries that are sort of reactionary in order to, you know, like for instance, Assad, the leader of Syria, he's kind of reactionary, but he is an underdog and he suffers under imperialism. And see, that's how Russia deals with its imperialism. It builds pacts with reactionary underdogs. Understand what I'm saying there, reactionary underdogs. And Syria went through a massive invasions from outside. And Russia did give aid to them to push off such invasions. You got to keep stuff like that in mind. That's how Russia does it. Russia likes to mix imperialism with humanitarianism. I would say that those are contradictions. You cannot mix imperialism with humanitarianism, but sometimes strategically empires do this. Like, it's always like, hey, I can give you a better deal than this other empire over here. And what I'm saying should not be taken as a slight against Russian civil society or in any way meant to reflect on what the Soviet Union was. I mean, we can criticize the Soviet Union, I definitely would, but I would also defend the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union shouldn't be slandered or smeared. It should be realized just how much the Soviet Union participated in blocking off Nazis many times. You know, like the Soviet Union did allow for, you know, at some point, you know, refugees, you know, to flee from Nazis. This was largely halted by the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which is really why it should be criticized. But there should be people like Marxist-Leninists and Marxist-Leninist Maoists who know enough about it so that they can express what they mean by that. Because it's been noted that a lot of people don't like the way that the chairman of the revolution criticizes this. What should be known is it should be criticized, because it wasn't just that. One should understand that it allowed for Germans to inform on Russians and Russians to inform on Germans. You know, basically, for instance, the original Antifa movement was in Germany, and it lost out due to the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. So the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact affected what? Marxist-Leninists, and the original Antifa was Marxist-Leninist. In its origination, anti-fascist action. So it has evolved since then, but you know, these are matters that should be discussed. But this next video is from November 7th, 2022.
Oh, this is the third part of a second series of interviews with Comrade Net. And this is the second part of the third part. So we have a lot to talk about, and we didn't have enough time. You know, we don't want to extend this discussion into beyond 30, 40 minutes at a time, and that's why we're doing these in various parts. Now, I'm Dr. Abraham Weisfeld, myself, activist who became an academic and treated this subject of revolutionary socialism in the political science department of the University of Quebec in Montreal, where I obtained my doctorate. I'd like to introduce you to Comrade Net here, who, as I've mentioned, is both a theorist, organizer, and activist of the Jewish Bundist movement in Phoenix, Arizona. And should begin by recalling our memory of the 5 martyred comrades of May 29th, 2019, and affirm that the Jewish Socialist Bund, exists, survives, and thrives. And we are discussing our various concepts, which are elaborating into a complete political culture, which is beyond the comprehension of many, even on the left, who do not realize that there is still much to be thought about and merely rely upon cliches. So here we go. And we have two major topics today. What is the conception of the Mashiach in Judaism, as differentiated, from Christianity and Islam? And we also want to know the nature of Judaism in terms of its abstract qualities and attributes. So, Comrade Net, could you introduce these two subjects to us, beginning with the concept of the Mashiach, as we speak?
Mashiach, yeah. So, I mean, we already recapped what is the Demarch and how is it not the anarchy, and what's Demarchism and how is it not anarchism, and what is Demarchy and how is it not anarchy. We touched briefly on the Messiah, but to go into full depth, this is a much more crisp elaboration. So there's essentially two types of Messiah, Mashiach, Gentile and Jewish. And I should preface this that while this is a Jewish stance, this is backed by years, centuries of understanding of what Mashiach is. Jesus was not the Messiah at all. And while there are several offenses in the Quran that a Jewish mind rejects referring to Jesus as the Messiah, we should clarify that the Christian concept of this is actually 10 times more offensive than what the Muslims think, because they mix it with the Savior, which there's no compatibility there with that notion. Gentile messiahs, there are basically essentially two kinds: unrevealed messiahs and full messiahs. So unrevealed messiahs are Gentile messiahs who are never seen as messiahs pretty much in their lifetime. Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X.
Okay, just slow down. We won't be able to understand you if you're just reading. Slow down when you're reading.
Okay. So unrevealed messiahs, and this is part of the Gentile concept, are messiahs that are not necessarily understood as messiah until they died because of what their achievements were when they were living. And the three best that come to mind is Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and Fred Hampton. Now, full messiahs, this is still on the Gentile concept, are messiahs who are recognized as messiahs during their lifetime, such as King how do you say it? The Persian king? It's I have it pronounced
Cyrus.
Yeah, he's referred to as a Mashiach in Isaiah chapter 45, verse 1. So, right away, even in the scriptures, it's obvious that Mashiach is a lot different than what the Jewish concept is much different than Muslim or Christian on how they choose to.
One can conclude that Judaism is not ethnocentric in its conception of the Mashiach.
No, it's not. There is a clarification of what a Jewish Messiah is, but that's also not as ethnic as people think, unless you're really talking about something from the line of Judah or something from the line of Joseph, and maybe from Levi. But even then, I mean, Moses is often referred to in Hebrew songs as Mashiach, and Maimonides, the Rambam, did consider him a king. So, and that gets in the whole concept of what is a king versus what is a monarch. A monarch is a corruption of what a king is. Of course, you could make the argument that a king will always degenerate into that. That seems to be what the message of the book of Samuel was.
Yes.
But like there's so on the concept of Jewish messiahs, there's also failed messiahs such as Simon Bar Kokhba. So if a Jewish messiah fails in any capacity, that's not the messiah at all. So the mandate for a Jewish messiah is technically more strict. It's more broad than people think, but it's more strict in what you must do. There's certain achievements that have to happen for that person to be considered a messiah. So, like I mentioned the David, line, the line from Joseph, the line from Levi, but the Talmud does refer to things like the house of Joseph, but it doesn't. But the reason why it doesn't point at the Samaritans, and this is because of the sectarianism due to the Judean versus the Samaritan, which existed before the writing of the Talmud. That this is actually evident in the scriptures itself. Yeah, and so the Bundist view of the Messiah only cancels out the Christian and Muslim takes on the Messiah. It doesn't take away their beliefs. It just, if we're going to be realistic, both the Christian and the Muslims believe in a second coming of Jesus, which is ridiculous because there's no prophecy of the Messiah having to redo his work. That's the problem with
In
that.
Islam, I think it's called the Mahdi. The Mahdi, the return of the Mahdi, or the coming of the Mahdi, is supposed to coincide with the return of Jesus Christ in Islam. But I've seen references in Islam that are more concerning even, in terms of there seems to be, a quoting from Jeremiah in which it is claimed that the Jewish nation kills its prophets. Now, I think this is a reference, to the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, and Christianity, which is claiming that the Jewish people were in favor of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, who is actually Yoshua ben Yaakov. And Islam seems to have picked this up as well. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, which is funny because if you get into the Quran rejects the idea that he was actually crucified at all. It does look like Islam was trying really hard from the start to bridge gaps between Jewish and Christian, which is,
yes,
you can make better terms between the two. In fact, that's not only possible, that's encouraged, but to try to make Jewish into Christian or Christian into Jewish is not it's not something that can be done ultimately, because I mean, if you strip away the concept, for instance, of divinity, the Christian message is too obsessed with salvation, whereas the Jewish message is way more about keeping oaths and respecting those oaths and never going back on oaths.
yes.
So and there are similarities between Christianity and Judaism that you don't see with Islam, actually. But those nuances, as interesting as they are, there's a reason why why Jewish and Christian, tend to be adverse to each other. If we were to accept all these religions as valid, it could be said that Christian and Jewish is the exact opposite within that range. Exact opposite.
Yes.
Not always, but usually it is.
Yeah.
The conflict between the Judean and Samaritan concepts of where the temple is, whether it's upon Zion or whether it's upon I believe it's Mount Gezira, is not really a valid question in terms of action today, because if that stuff happens, it happens. Right now, if we were to talk about the third temple in the reference to Zion, as opposed to a second temple upon Gezira, the most logical conclusion would be that the old city, if it could be cleansed out from basically the profiteering that exists in there, that would be the third temple, especially because Jerusalem is now bigger than the old city. Al-Quds, I do think Al-Quds is a sacred word. To me, that's a reference to the third Beit HaMikdash upon Zion. And there's a lot of stuff that's missing. For instance, everybody thinks of Jerusalem when they think of Zion, but Zion used to mean, it's very hard to get your hands on info like this, but Zion used to mean the road of hills from Ethiopia all the way to Persia, which would include what's now Jerusalem.
In effect, an ancient mountain range.
Yes. And I think it's because of I think that there's been a lot of forgetting about how much both Assyrian and African roots are in Judaism, and the removal of the African and Assyrian roots in Judaism, I think, has caused a lot of the deformity. And I'm not referring to Judaism as deformed. I'm saying that there are setbacks in Judaism because of the confusion, historically. It doesn't invalidate anything like the Talmud or the Zohar, but it does mean that while there'd be more of a central doctrine with us, like, say, as opposed to the Hindus, if we were serious about Judaism, we could admit it's a bit more multiple choice. And I'm not talking about versus conservative reform or reconstructions. I'm talking about within the Orthodox. Like, for instance, Ashkenazim traditionally will not let you have rice on Pesach because that doesn't make sense in the desert. But a lot of Sephardim will have rice because, okay, well, so what? There was no rice. The rice itself was not therefore unkosher for Pesach. That's still a disagreement which exists to this day. It's not really an important disagreement, but it does show how much of a multiple choice that, you know, Judaism might be, you know, and I do think that that's why there's invested interests from certain groups like Chabad to help make old sects disappear. I'm trying to help what was anciently referred to as the Kushafra survive, otherwise known as the Afram Jews. That's the Jewish people of the West African diaspora. And they're interested in the Samaritan texts, a lot of them. But you know, the third temple is this is the old city, you know, and I've taken Ladino words, that's Judo-Spanish to reference them. I mean, I may have to like check the accuracy, but I know the one for the Jewish quarter, Juderia, would be an accurate term. Juderia is a old Ladino term for the Jewish quarter of a city. Like there is actually.
Can you repeat that? Can you repeat that slowly?
Juderia. It means the Jewish quarter. It's a Judo-Spanish. I believe there's a place in Spain that's still referred to this, but it's always meant the Jewish quarter. The words I have for this would be Musleria for the Muslim quarter, Netzeria for the Christian quarter, Armeneria for the Armenian quarter, and Juderia for the Jewish quarter. You know, and again, this is not going to be a third temple without certain things being removed, such as the Israelis calling themselves Israeli. That's highly defamatory to anybody Jewish or Palestinian to take up that term. And then, you know, as I said before, you know, not all trade, but the market within the old city doesn't belong there. I mean, you have all these beautiful Christian, Jewish, Muslim, and Armenian places.
How could the old city is the city built within the walls that were erected by the Emir or Caliph Soleimani, and in the entranceway, in the entranceway that is in downtown Jerusalem has an inscription above the entrance, you know, which is a reference to Abraham, and not to Muhammad, but to Abraham by Caliph Soleimani.
It's almost prophetic because you and I have talked about this. That's the Arabic word for Solomon.
Yes.
You know.
Yes, and he adopted that name as Caliph, or was named that as Caliph, because, you know, the distinctions between Judaism and Islam are not as great as that conceived of by the Christian theology, because Christianity itself wants to differentiate itself from Judaism and Islam. It presumes, you know, that it is superior to both for unspecified reasons.
It always is unspecified. You just got to trust that the prophet was really speaking to God, referring the prophet as Muhammad. Muhammad was a peacemaker, though. I will say that about him, and he genuinely did, you know, want unity. I mean, there's a lot of setbacks within the Islamic text itself, but at the same time, there's different concepts provided in those texts that you don't find in the Christian text. You know, this is probably why we even today have such a better time talking to typically Muslims, because there's much more to relation there. As I had said before, the prototype to Judaism was basically Jacob. The prototype to Christianity was actually Esau, and the prototype to Islam was Ishmael. Well, which one is the disgraced son if you read the text? Esau. Esau's problematic. His children would be problematic, and they are the Christians. Yes. So they are, in fact, an Abrahamic religion, but we have a perspective for that. In fact, I would say the mother of Christianity really is Wicca, and Wicca does predate Gardner. A lot of people say it came from Gardner, but if you know about Gardner, he witnessed priestesses doing a ritual, and they believed in the maiden, mother, and crone. So Wicca does predate Gardner. Like it's funny that this one guy takes it, but I would say that Christianity, the father of Christianity is Judaism, but the mother is Wicca. And I would say that with Islam, the father of Judaism the father of Islam is Judaism, but the mother is Zoroastrianism, you know, the Persian monotheist religion. In fact,
yes.
You'll notice we don't believe Satan is the devil. We don't believe that that's an opposition the way that both the Christians and the Muslims depict. Well, where's that for the devil? That's where that comes from.
It should be mentioned that the Samaritans who live on Mount Gerizim, as it's pronounced, had a second temple there, and that
Second, as in second from their first one, or they had or you mean one separate from Zion?
oh, well, I should also mention that the first video made of the Gerizim Museum, Samaritan Museum, which I made in 2011, I believe, was on YouTube, has more than 10,000 views on it. It became a primary source information and brought a lot more attention to the Samaritans. When I spoke to the son of the chief rabbi, when I came there next, he mentioned the importance of that video, and it's up on the YouTube channel right now as well. So there are vast differences and tendencies within Judaism that we've mentioned, and that should be known about to understand, what the difference is between Zionism and Judaism, because its origins go back not only to the Protestant Reformation, but to previous tendencies that fed into that current, and I suppose helped to create Protestantism in itself.
Especially the Crusades, that seems to be the greatest progenitor to all of that.
To Christianity.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And we know that Christian Zionism predates Jewish Zionism, and that it was mostly Protestant.
Yes. In fact, it was invented in 1835 by some British Protestant who felt that the place to send the Jewish people would be Palestine, on behalf of the British Empire, of course. So, which, is incredible, strategy on the part of the imperialists, to develop a theory like that took like more than 100 years to develop. But nonetheless, the Anglo-Saxon, worldview is a long-term world domination strategy. It's not, just some willy-nilly, like a colonial project that preceded it. This was something that has a long-term strategy, and that involves the United States of America now and the whole Commonwealth, as it used to be called, with Australia and Canada. So, this mentality of Anglo-Saxon chauvinism supremacy is something that has not died away. It hasn't disappeared, despite of the impression, propagated that this is, old stuff. In fact, the United States is sacrificing Europe at this moment, in order to favor the domination of its own alignment, which is basically the financial capital of London. So
there's a certain irony to that.
Yeah, the colony, giving sustenance, to the imperial center. Okay, well, we'll take care of that. There's another topic that you wanted to dive into. Go ahead.
Yeah. I would like to know more the details, by the way, at some point about Mount
Gerizim?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because when you say second temple, I'm not sure if you mean like they built a second temple or if you're referring to separate from Zion, but I'm interested.
Yeah, they built a second temple that was destroyed by the returning Jewish petty bourgeoisie from Babylon. And they came back and they destroyed it, the second temple, in order to build their own temple in Al-Quds at Jerusalem, because they wanted to have a monopoly. They wanted to dominate, what was it, the Israelite, political culture at the time. That's what the sectarianism, that caused the split between Judea and Samaria. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of good you can say about Ezra, but there's a lot to criticize as well. And for what it's worth, he was never considered a prophet. He was a scribe.
Yeah.
That was elected for certain purposes. But what I wanted to show was that this word here is essential, which should not be confused with this word, panentheism, not pantheism, and like just showing you that I'm not referring to any of these things. I'm referring to panentheism, which is what Judaism is. Judaism is not monotheist. That's a big mistake that most of us are actually making consistently. But when you get into what Judaism describes as divine, while there are a lot of overlaps between us and the Muslims, there is a serious difference here. This is how I would describe monotheism. You have the divine, which is separate from creation, whereas pantheism shows that there's division, but it's all within. So there's the divine and there's creation. So, which is not the same as pantheism. Pantheism would be all as one, whereas this is saying that technically all is stemming from within. So, you know, you have the creation is within the divine. That's how pantheism works. And this is constantly, like, this is most noticeable in books like Job, in books like Ezekiel, the Psalms, and you can find allusions to it, allusions to it in the Sefer Moshe, the Torah scroll. It takes a lot of research to find it, not because it should, but because we've kind of self-colonized the way we speak of God. In fact, as we both know, we don't even like to say that word, you know, because that word doesn't
Yes,
describe,
precisely.
that word does not describe divinity. I like to say deity, which is saying deity, but replacing the D with the TH, because I think that's how you universally, to all these religions, describe the divine. But even then, I would rather not even say that, because the divine is too big to be boxed in like that. That's very, no offense to our Muslim comrades. But,
Well, Judaism fundamentally defines the deity as the unknown. So, you know, how you give a name or description to the unknown. Judaism, by definition, creates a space, you know, which is the unknown, because we cannot define ourselves as a deity as capable of creating, you know, the universe. Therefore, the divine, you know, which is capable of doing so, and which has done so, and in fact, cannot be the same as us, and we cannot know what it is, because we are not that. So, you know, basically, you know, that's how you begin. You know, but in Christianity, all of a sudden you have a God, you know, like walking around, you know, like with a pretty face on, you know. No, you know, like that's so sort of reductionist. It seems a bit ridiculous compared to the Judaic conception. But there's something I wanted to add on to your interesting, you know, analysis, because, you know, in the 19th century, Marxism was based upon the scientific method. It's called the science. You know, Marxism is, you know, scientific method. Okay, what is this scientific method that I was referring to? Because in the 19th century, what was called the scientific method is not what became the scientific method in the 20th century, you know, after the Einsteinian revolution of 1905, same year as the Soviet revolution with, you know, in the scientific method of the 19th century, you know, you have causality, in which you have a train of events, you know, one of which influences the next to become the next, and the next engenders the following. And it's a linear conception, which has, you know, political implications too. You know, political philosophy is called linear periodization, in which Marxism adopted, you know, as an explanation of the historical materialism and development of feudalism, capitalism, socialism, as projected by Marx. Now, this conception had its cosmological equivalent, you know, because if there's cause-effect relationship, then the universe, you know, is causing itself to propagate itself, and it was propagated previously by previous causes, you know, which produced, you know, the effect, which is what we are living in now. And there's a linear sort of, you know, connection between the two, between cause and effect, and effect and cause. So that would mean, you know, that the Marxists began to adopt a conception of cosmology, which was never written down, but it was conceived of as a infinite proposition in time. Time was, you know, like very sort of, you know, absolute and rigorous, you know, and rigid. And
linear periodization.
Yeah, and leading to periodization. So it was, you know, cosmology conceived of the universe as something that had an infinite beginning and an infinite end, that it had always existed, that it always existed in the same form and would continue to exist in the same form, except that you began in thermodynamics to have the principle of entropy. Okay, so the whole thing begins to break down at that point, in which, you know, all energy, you know, degenerates into heat, and there's no longer, enough energy in a concentrated form to provide for the suns and the life, that we know and enjoy today. So there's an inevitable decline to the universe itself. It's not something that continues in the same form. And the corollary to that, evident, law, which was absolute, is that, if there was an end to the universe, then maybe there was a beginning as well. That it was not something that, existed previously in the same form that existed now. So this corresponds, to the Judaic, conception in Genesis of the creation of the universe. The first day there was, a light. Light was created the first day, which are the suns. It corresponds to the cosmology that I studied at university in my astronomy course. The second day, the planet, coalesced into rocks, around the suns, because there was a lot of dust hanging around, that didn't get trapped in by the suns. Okay, so second day, there was the firmament, as it said, as it's translated into Protestant English. Okay, so, all of a sudden, like Judaism seems to have a better theory of cosmology than Marxism did.
I appreciate the way that you're describing the book of Genesis, because the biggest offense from, I would hope, a religious, magical, or scientific mind is the notion of creation science as the Christians purported it, because it's ignoring what I would say. What you just did is you basically gave a proper alchemical explanation, which is what it is describing. It's not describing everything as literally as people think it is. You described what I would call the alchemical process of creation, which is what it is talking about. We also have to remember that the first, it wasn't called that at the time, but the Big Bang comes straight from Kabbalah before scientists picked it up.
Yeah. Yeah, right on. So we have a few minutes left, before our time expires. I think we have about 3 minutes left, so do you have a comment to make in conclusion?
Yes. So the Messianic age in Bundist terms should be that we should seek the true peace of Jerusalem and that recognize Al-Quds as this third temple. But on top of that, we have to know how to get there. And the answer is we have a concept in Judaism called Tikkun Olam. And I would suggest people pay attention to Dr. Weisfeld's revolutionary activism in Nablus, because I think that you started something that we should all be following after, this Tikkun Olam, seeking justice. But it will come with the price of Zionists trying to clamp down on us. And, they're already doing that, but...
Oh yeah, Tikkun Olam, even by an individual is so important, because when I was there in Palestine, out on the streets at the demonstrations resisting the invasions of the military into the villages, one after the other, well, it doesn't matter how many of me there were. there were some other internationals, but I was the only Jewish person there. But it doesn't matter, because all that matters is that even one Jewish person would resist the Zionist military occupation of Palestine. Then you have, the destruction of Zionism, there and then, in terms of that action. It demonstrates the fallacy of Zionism in and of itself.
And your name is Abraham, so you can technically represent all three, although it might be difficult given, your rocky history with Christians. I remember you telling me about stuff you went through as a boy.
Yeah, to be expected, It didn't. I had no problem with that. I was able to resist that quite well. So in conclusion, what I would like to say is that Bundism is a fourth position theory which overcomes the sectarianism, overcomes the absoluteness, overcomes the formal logic of the previous theories of revolution. And this is what we must be able to do in order to develop a theory of revolution that will work. Because what has been tried previously has not corresponded to the conditions existing. The existing conditions have not allowed for the success of the socialist revolution in Europe. that did not allow for the isolated, socialist revolution in Russia either. And there were reasons why those revolutions, were limited and why they limited themselves. And those are the things that we need to overcome. And in terms of Europe and the first world, we know that the working class is not necessarily a revolutionary class and can be bought off, with the proceeds and stolen from imperialism and all that. But, in the international context, it becomes another matter, when the working class in the first world, comes behind the third world revolution, when it becomes evident, that the international relations, are shifting. And we see that the prospect of a united international world, on an equal basis, offers a greater validity, to human life than what capitalism even is able to offer under imperialism. So I look forward, to the third world revolution, which is underway. Yes, it is. Now we have Brazil changing. Iran is solid, and resisting American pressure, and moving into an axis, not an axis, but a federation of the third world, with Russia and China. And Russia, which was seeking, to become, like a first world country, European and all that, has to give up on that prospect now with the pipelines having been blown up. So the umbilical cord, with Europe is gone. So what we have is Russia aligning with the third world, as it was originally before the Russian Revolution. Interesting development.
That and China still has a proletariat. So if their governments are problematic, it's way more likely that those populations would overturn their governments than Europe or the United States or Canada.
Yes. But China has a large communist party. I mean, it's the proportion of the population that are in the Chinese Communist Party is not great, but it's significant. I think it's about 5% of the population, 100 million people or so. So interesting development possible there. In Russia, there's no organized, opposition yet, but nonetheless, the pressures of geopolitical life, are pressing Russia and Putin to resist, the encroachments of NATO. So that's interesting in and of itself, even though it's not, a socialist government, the workers' government that's doing it. So something's happening. We'll see what's going to turn out, to be the case, but I think it's generally something that is unexpected and welcome.
Yeah, so long as we realize that the nation state needs to be we got to get rid of that concept. Even
Yes.
The state go altogether, but if the state remains, at least don't let it be the nation state, because that's been a disaster.
Yes. Okay, that's all for now. We'll be back another time. Okay, bye for now. Never again. Yeah,
Never again, Tarzans.
Palestine is the Holy Land. It is the pan-Abrahamic Holy Land. The old city of Jerusalem is the third temple of Zion. It has 4 quarters, a Jewish quarter, an Armenian quarter, a Muslim quarter, and a Christian quarter. There is no Zion in Zionism. At the very place where many Christians believe that their Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, as they call him, and they claim him to be their Messiah, they believe him to be crucified and resurrected. This area where he was crucified and resurrected stands today as the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Shared by 6 denominations, it is a church riven by, more accurately, six sects, not denominations. Denomination is such a Christian term. It is a church. Hey, I'm reading this off of the Al Jazeera transcript. It is a cathedral, not church. It's a cathedral. Church is the body of the Christians. Parish is a small building, but cathedral. This is believed upon by the Pope and stuff. So come on, and by the Patriarch of Constantinople, and all the actual theological authorities in Christianity recognize this place. It's very sacred. It's very holy to Christians. It's shared by 6 Christian sects. It is and there is a church community around this cathedral. it's riven by a confusing and complex series of spiritual battles, placing it at the very heart of the Western Orient, otherwise known as the Middle East, and some people would also call that the Fertile Crescent. Jerusalem, all of it is the capital of Palestine. The Zionist state calling itself Israel is without legitimacy. The Jewish portions of the Holy Land are all Palestinian. Palestine is Jewish, Christian, and Muslim, also Armenian and Samaritan. Now, another factor here, the Sepulchre, its groundkeeper is not a Christian. Members of a Muslim family have locked and unlocked the Holy Sepulchre's front door every day for the last 800 years. In this 2007 film, Al Jazeera explores the background to this unusual story and how it reflects the meaning of a worldwide range of people, despite their religious differences. February. This was put out, however, on YouTube on February 25th, 2018. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem has been indefinitely closed in protest against what the church leaders say is discriminatory. The Israeli policy, or Zionist policy, it is Israeli policy in a cultural context. Further elaborations and difference in how I say that can be viewed by how Dr. Weisfeld chooses to place it in his how he thinks would be in a more reciprocal manner. But this policy is aimed at weakening the Christian presence in the Holy Land, in the Holy City, that being Jerusalem. And Jerusalem's centered around the Al-Quds Old City, by the way. The temple, as I would say. The interfaith temple, that is the third temple. If we want a temple that looks like the temple described in our scriptures, then we should be looking towards, the Samaritans. That which is upon Zion, though, is as Al-Quds. And so, again, there's no Zion in Zionism. And so church leaders say that Israel was violating the status quo at the site, which is one of the holiest in Christianity, at an unprecedented level. Holding the Key was first broadcast on Al Jazeera English in February 2007. I do hope you enjoy.
It's a normal Sunday morning. 3 separate services are being held here, in the same place, at the same time, just meters from each other. The Armenian Orthodox are conducting Mass in Armenian in a chapel above the church. The Assyrian Orthodox Mass is conducted in Aramaic, the language spoken by Jesus himself. While the Roman Orthodox service is conducted in Arabic. This is the story of Christianity's holiest church. Jerusalem is a divided city. It's been this way throughout its modern history. Over nearly 4 decades, the Israeli authorities have tried to unify it as their capital, but today the rift between its inhabitants is deeper than ever. Arab and Jewish residents live in different districts. They speak different languages, attend different schools, read different newspapers, watch different television channels. They live different lives. The Arab Quarter looks, feels and smells like any other Arab city. Traders and shoppers jostling for space, and women wearing hijabs are all features of this part of the city. The Jewish quarter, by contrast, feels and sounds altogether different. This part of the city is Western in appearance, and its outlook is distinctly Jewish. There's no mixing between the two. You won't find Arabs in the Jewish quarter, nor Jews in the Arab quarter. But because the city is small and of great importance to Judaism, Christianity and Islam, it's a place where all have to interact. And there is no better example of the multicultural, multi-faith character of Jerusalem than one of its most famous sites. This is no ordinary quay, and this is no ordinary building. On Christmas Day in the year 800, the day of Charlemagne's coronation in Rome, the new emperor is said to have been given a similar key by the Patriarch of Jerusalem as a token of respect. Today's copy belongs to Wajih Nusayba. Surprisingly perhaps for the doorkeeper of such a site, Nusayba, like his predecessors, is a Muslim. Surprising, because this is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the holiest shrine in Christendom. Every year, hundreds of thousands of pilgrims and tourists, the faithful alongside the curious, visit the site where Christians believe Jesus Christ was buried. The original church was built in 330 AD by Empress Helena, the mother of the Roman Emperor Constantine. It houses the last stations of the cross on the Via Dolorosa, the journey which Christians believe Jesus took to his crucifixion. Here too it's claimed his body was washed and buried. The practice of having a Muslim guard the sepulchre goes back to the 7th century. It was then the Islamic ruler Caliph Omar took Jerusalem and put one of his Arab warriors, an ancestor of the Nusaybas, in charge of the shrine.
When the Caliph Omar came to Jerusalem in the 7th century, my predecessors came with him. We entered the city as conquerors. Caliph Omar received the keys of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre from the Roman Orthodox Patriarch Sepharinius, and from that time on, we are entrusted with the opening and closing the church, and we pass it from father to son.
In his role as key keeper, Wajih Nusayba has met past and present world leaders, including Russian President Vladimir Putin and George Bush before he became President of the United States.
The truth is that I saw Putin as a great man. He visited the site and showed a lot of respect for it, as opposed to President Bush, who was in such a hurry that the visit did not last longer than 5 minutes. In fact, President Putin sent me a gift after his visit.
Wajih Nusayba's only son, Obada, is said to follow in his father's footsteps. Like his ancestors, Obada is very aware of the historic significance of his role. It's a matter of family honor.
This is like a long march. and we have to finish it. We started it, and we have to complete it to the end.
The same family has not only guarded the church, but has acted as an arbiter among the 7 feuding Christian denominations. For the Armenian Church, which is one of the 3 main groups here, it's an arrangement which works well.
Sultan Salahuddin has ordered that a Muslim doorkeeper keep the peace among the different Christian factions, and I think this has been beneficial to the Christian denominations, and we live almost harmoniously with our Muslim doorkeepers.
For others, though, this arrangement is less than satisfactory.
Muslims have the keys because the government of the time, the Muslim government, gave the keys to these families, and they can be seen as representatives of the government. The giving of the keys was an act of sovereignty, and it's part of history. There's nothing we can do about that.
Although Wajih admits to being deeply touched by the Christian rituals, he never prays inside the church. Instead, he goes to the mosque next door. The Omar Mosque, built and named after the 7th century conqueror of Jerusalem, is where Omar himself used to pray. He refused to use the church in case it encouraged Muslims to take it over for their own religious purposes. And it was in this same spirit of tolerance and coexistence that Omar compiled a covenant regulating the affairs of the local community. A new marble replica of the original covenant hangs near the mosque entrance.
The Omari covenant. This is an assurance of peace and protection by the servant of Allah, Omar, commander of the believers to the people of Jerusalem. He gives them an assurance of protection for the lives, properties, churches, and crosses. They shall not be occupied, demolished, or taken away. They shall not be coerced in their religion, nor shall any of them be harmed.
It's not only Muslims who value the covenant, Christians too.
العهدة العمرية لم تكتب لكي تكون في فترة زمنية محددة أو في تاريخ معين.
The Omari covenant was not written to be restricted to a certain date or a historical period. Instead, it was written to form a way of life, culture, and thought. This is how we view it. And we at the Orthodox Church continuously stress the value of the Omari covenant because it illustrates the historical context to our relationships. We link it to the present and its value in cementing the relations and avoiding signs of division and sectarianism. We're one people, one family, Muslims and Christians in this holy land. And the Omari covenant ought to be an important element in strengthening this relationship.
في ترسيخ وفي تقوية هذه العلاقة.
The Christian Church's many identities and fragile harmony are reflected in the distribution of duties between the denominations. today, the incense ritual is performed by the Roman Orthodox, followed by the Armenians, and then the Copts, each according to its own protocol. In many ways, the building is a microcosm of Jerusalem itself. The historical divisions, the constant battle against foreign interference. The tombs of Godfrey de Bouillon, Jerusalem's conqueror, and his brother Baldwin I, the first Crusader king of Jerusalem, are within the church. Not far away is the place of prayer and meditation used by Salah ad-Din, the mighty Muslim commander who in 1187 retook Jerusalem from the Crusaders. More than 8 centuries later, the issue of ownership and occupation are as heated as ever.
The Orthodox Church is the first church with the oldest heritage, and it is the church that one day used to own all of the holy sites. The other churches were only able to exist here as a result of the arrival of the Crusaders, and only then did those churches come.
We came after the Crusades because the Crusaders left in 1187 and we basically came in 1233. We came with the permission of the rulers here, and I don't see it as a problem. I mean, we're proud of our history.
The argument as to who has the primary claim to the sepulchre is as old as the building itself. First in line, so it claims, is the Ethiopian Church.
Ethiopia has long history with the Holy Land since the Old Testament, since the 1st century.
Over the last 50 years, one particular territorial dispute has come to a head. Who owns the Deir Sultan monastery? The monastery is directly above the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, perched on top of it. Both the Copts and the Ethiopians have long claimed to be the sole rightful guardians. The matter was complicated by the Israeli occupation of East Jerusalem in 1967. The Copts blamed the Israelis for handing over Deir Sultan to the Ethiopians. For their part, the Ethiopians, who claim to have always had a presence in the Holy Land, say it's theirs not by gift, but by right.
This is Deir al-Sultan, the Coptic monastery which housed the Ethiopians as guests of the Coptic Church. It is in these small huts where Coptic families used to live. Whenever Ethiopians came here, a Coptic family would move out to make way for them, as guests of the Coptic Church. It stayed like this for a long time.
Now it belongs to us first, from the beginning. We started living in the Holy Land first, and the Copts came after us.
On the 25th of April in 1970, we were at the church praying during Easter Mass. My sister was walking outside the monastery and she saw the Israeli army standing at the doors. They were breaking the locks and then replacing them with their own. It wasn't the Ethiopians, but the Israeli army, and they placed security cordons. My sister came running to tell us that they changed the keys and that the army was outside.
No, the places belongs to us before the Copt. The Copt took from us the places, or so many places.
The political situation at the time was very acrimonious between Egypt and Israel. There was no peace treaty yet, and there was great hostility between the two. And that was a way to get back at Egypt because they were enemies.
Well, we are trying to solve in Christian way to discuss the two sister churches. But now there is no solution because, you know, there is no agreement between the churches, and the mother churches are trying to solve the problem. The patriarchs are trying to solve the problem, but now, until now, there is no solution. But we are waiting for that, for a solution.
But some of those mother churches have already made up their mind.
نحن بالنسبة إلينا نحن ندعم موقف الكنيسة القبطية.
For us, we support the position of the Coptic Church. We respect and value the Coptic Church and its role, especially its spiritual, social, and humanitarian role, represented by His Holiness Pope Shenouda. I believe that what happened was an act of revenge against the Coptic Church because of its position and its leaders' position towards the peace treaties with Israel. So this step was a vengeful act and one of blackmail and pressure on the Coptic Church.
But beyond these local factional disputes is an issue bigger than them all, and one which may ultimately focus the attention of Jerusalem's Christian community on greater unity. That problem is emigration. Many Christians are abandoning the Holy Land for a better life for themselves and their families. The reason, it's argued, is the Israeli presence in East Jerusalem and the other occupied territories.
I believe that everybody recognizes this fact, and that includes our Muslim brothers who we share this country with. They all recognize the importance of a Christian presence in this Holy Land. Because what is the alternative? How can we talk about Palestine? How can we talk about Jerusalem, the place where the church was established and where the gospel was spread, and for it to be devout of Christians? This is illogical and beyond comprehension. For the land of the birth of Christ and His mission to no longer have Christian presence, there are many reasons for the migration of Christians from this land, but the main one is to do with the occupation and the effects of the occupation. The economic and social catastrophes generated by the occupation has forced many of them to immigrate.
At the end of a busy day, Wajih Nusayba locks up the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and heads home to his family. But he'll be back tomorrow, early, to open the door again at 4 in the morning.